The day that the government comes into my bedroom to start analyzing who I'm sleeping with, is the day that I would declare that my bedroom is too small for that. And I've told my wife that the day that we must fight the government is the day that they come into our bedroom. Yeah. As long as nobody's getting hurt. Yes. Right. So there's some consensual stuff happening there. I'm paraphrasing because of the children who may be listening. The fact is, our bedrooms are not places for states to intervene. So how can we have a conversation about people's freedom of choice to choose their sexual partners or their intimate partners, and we don't give the freedom to ourselves to be able to have this discussion, right? So I think these are 2 points. Binyavanga, one of our one of our most famous Kenyan writers, was a gay man. And I listened to John Githongo, the anti-corruption whistleblower, on I think it was Spice FM even in one of the mornings. Yeah. And John said, we didn't think very much about gay people, but we knew it was something that was not African. And then we discovered that one of our school friends, Binyavanga, who we all loved platonically, was a gay man. And then we had to confront the fact that actually we had a friend who was gay. And that side of his life we didn't understand until much later, until he came out. It doesn't say which sexes. So it doesn't say male and female, but it could be a male person, an intersex person, or a male person, right? Now, these are constitutional guidelines, guardrails for the society, right? So as Amnesty International, our position has always been that to persecute somebody for loving somebody of the same sex is actually, it's a human rights violation. Okay. Right? To essentially have them lose their job, to be evicted from their homes, to be murdered, like Sheila Lumumba, simply because she was a lesbian, or I'll come back. There are other cases that we've had.
Agreed.
Okay, so if we can agree that being gay or being in a same-sex relationship does not give license to people to harm you,
of course,
or to deny, then we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. The drama festivals that were going on, these are the nationals.
Yes.
Right? Before you get to the nationals, you have to go through
a process.
You have to go through
zonals.
You go through zonals, divisionals,
zonals,
divisionals, district. You have to go through, and you are adjudicated against other plays.
Yes.
So it's not that it just so happened that
it didn't just pop up.
It did not just pop up.
Yeah.
Right or wrong? So now all of a sudden, this play imefika nationals, and it's a problem. Somebody said something that was very interesting. Mika mentioned about, like guys used to do plays, even talking about, like M1, but he didn't have a problem with it. How many of you remember, how many guys remember Betrayal in the City?
Yeah. Francis Mbuga.
Yeah. Yes.
I have no front.
Yes. Let us go back. You remember Akina KJ, Ridiculous?
Yeah.
What were they doing?
Oh yeah, they were on another level.
Did you see MO1? Did you see MO1 doing whatever he did?
Yeah.
Did you see Kibaki and Lucy attacking them?
The government inspector.
Yes, government inspector.
There's a great story about XYZ, which is a story about how Kamodo, faced with in Moi's present, came into a room and found Moi's watching XYZ, and he said, "Mzee, we are going to arrest these people. He was told, no, don't arrest these people. I'm enjoying the show, and it is important. They are making me famous."
Yes.
You see? So now that is then.
Yeah.
And by the way, these set books, and I think Mika mentioned this, these set books, we used to do them in high school.
In school.
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
And they had papers, paper 1, paper 2.
We did.
Yeah.
What was the problem? Because these people who are coming out and talking about politicizing or whatever, which schools did they go to that they did not do any set books?
Yeah,
Give me a break, man.
Jakrabondi up on YouTube is saying, because we are going to read their comments, because I think it's important for Irungu also to know that these opinions are not limited to Kenyans in Kenya. Even Kenyans in the diaspora
For sure.
have these opinions. Jakrabondi is saying government has a responsibility to maintain law and order. The problem is Kenyans are too emotional at this time to see any sense. By the way, no students were brutalized as it's being claimed here. The journalists were dispersed by police when they tried to force their entry into the venue. So this is a comment.
Kidogo tu kwa Mjaluo. Umeisoma na Kijaluo yako yote.
It was just a random.
You should have let Omosh read it. Here's the thing.
It was a random. It was a random accent.
Let's come back to actually what happened.
Yes.
Right? Because for Amnesty, factual evidence.
So the facts that we can agree upon that where there's
7 tear gas canisters were shot at children.
Okay.
The children were unarmed, and let's not forget they were children. 3 journalists from 3 separate media houses. I think it was NTV, KTN, and
Citizen.
And Citizen, of course.
And also Citizen.
And so forth. So there may be a few more journalists there. Were actually, they say they were shot at. And actually the Citizen journalists put up to the camera a spent cartridge, which is not a tear gas cartridge. It was
a live bullet.
It was a live bullet.
Yeah.
They were beaten, right? But I think the point we have to make is actually the state in this context, the Ministry of Education, the National Police Service. There's an article, I think today's newspaper suggests that most of the police officers that were there that night were actually brought in from Nairobi. The question we have to ask, why do you bring in police officers from another jurisdiction if you are not doing something that you do not want them to be recognized? Because technically there was no reason to bring in other police officers. So I think to say that there was that they were trying to protect law and order, no, there was actually a breakdown of law and order that happened in that moment when they tried to stop people from being able to perform the play.
Yes, so I know, and this is why, like some of these comments, and I like hearing what people have to say, but Jakrabondi, it is very, very important that we stop arguing about this is right. Yes, so let's be fair to ourselves. Let's be fair to ourselves, because we live in a day and age where this information is verifiable. It's not one of those that he said, she said. It's verifiable. There were people who are there. There's footage. There's evidence of what happened. So
before we move on, let me just say something. Pertaining to what Jakrabondi was saying, and this was mentioned. I will segue into what I think Akina Linus Kaikai were talking about on Newsgang, addressing this matter and looking at the play, where in part of the play there's an incident where a guy, something has gone on, shot has been fired, and it's a stray bullet or something like that, and the person who was being attacked is claiming that I was shot at by a stray bullet. And the officer says, no, you interfered with the bullet.
So the bullet
was headed where it was headed. You are the stray one.
Then you strayed
into
the way of the bullet.
Exactly. Or I think the father, he was trying to argue about the father. That is the type of justification or like now what was Jakrabondi was saying over there, talking about how
you're saying they were not brutalized. So tear gas canisters were lobbed at where they were, but they're the ones who interfered.
They're the ones who interfered
with the tear gas canisters.
Walienda wakafungua tear gas kwa chapa macho.
So that's what he's saying.
But and I think verifiable data from a guy's.
And I think it's
that
important.
Is going to be refuted.
And I think it's important to talk about the ridiculousness of some of these claims that are being made, because this idea of let's have a conversation on whether this happened or not, when there's evidence, there's verifiable, and there's one thing when there's evidence, but when there's easily verifiable evidence that you can just go online behind a Google search and find, but you still want to have a discussion around it. That is what I think, especially on the OneMicShow, will honestly say that those discussions have no value. We like all opinions and all shades, but those discussions, this is white, then you say it's blue, then we start discussing, is this white or blue? That's a discussion.
It reminds me of
that
maggots.
has no value.
It reminds me of maggots. But
And that's why, I'm still going to double down on these government spin masters. These are the modern day home guards.
Because then they have funding.
Yes.
And they have got access.
Yes.
They have been given.
And they are shameless.
They are shameless.
They are mannerless.
And they are.
But they're not nameless.
Kuna kazi zingine.
They're not David
kuna kazi
Madeke.
zingine-
Yes.
Yeah.
Mnaanza
Kuna
kuongea
kazi
kama
zingine
Gen Z.
mushangaa.
Leaderless,
like-
leaderless, moneyless.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
And just
there's
careless.
some jobs.
Yeah, Mika.
There's some jobs you sit down and you wonder, because you can see, like, when you saw the spin that was happening here, and then you read what Alai was writing, and then you look at Alai's picture and you're like, you're such a huge man. Like, when you mwanaume mkubwa, si hata umri, like mwili, like you're a huge man. When you mtu mzima, like, for Kenyans, kwa Kenya kwa ni watu wafupi, so huyu jamaa ni mso. Alafu wani huo, like, unajuza, how do you feel when you are sitting down, unakula ugali na nyama, umenunuliwa na pesa, unajua umedanganya kitu obvious watu wanaona. Like, Ali calling you home guys anawaheshimu. You are the shameless bunch of human beings outside here.
Well,
Pushing a wrong narrative for money. Like, that's the worst of the worst you can ever be. You know you're lying, and you are raising a family in that environment that you're lying about just because you're being paid for now. Like, nah, I will never respect anybody.
okay, hapa comment ilikuwa inakuja from Stephen JJ on Facebook, anasema our host clearly pointed out we have people in leadership positions that clearly should not be in those positions. We elect the worst of the society and we expect good governance. Maze tuache ufala. This is also a reflection of us, the electorate. We ain't getting out of this scot-free. Now, wanna go to the elephant in the room, because your time, I told you, 3 hours in this space moves very fast. It's not like the outside world. It moves differently.
He didn't believe.
But to the elephant in the room, and this is. Are
you referring to one of us?
Eh?
Are you calling one of us an elephant? I came here not to be abused, to be disrespected.
No, English.
And I'm working on my weight loss. My weight loss program is very important.
Paul, English is like my third language. Maybe your expression. Your expression.
Ndovuku.
Yeah, niliambiwa when you use that expression, it will seem like you know a lot of English. So clearly, it's an expression. Yeah. Anyway, but the LGBTQ rights issue. Yeah. Now. Plus. Oh, there's the LGBTQIA.
Plus I.
Now here,
one.
So I'm gonna try to be as very balanced on this, because we all here also have very strong positions, sometimes on opposite sides on this issue.
True.
But is this issue a Western imposed agenda, or is it part of the broader fight for dignity and safety for people within those communities in Kenya? Now, how should we think about this issue while also acknowledging local religious and cultural norms and without falling into ideological traps?
Sure.
Or as UK said, it's a non-issue.
Yes, and Irungu will tell you, be very careful when you answer this question.
Nimeanza kuogopa sasa.
Yes. Usiogope.
Okay, so
Usiogope.
So let me start with
Usiogope but ogopa.
Yeah.
Let me phrase it this way. I think, I guess same-sex relationships an invention of the West, or is it an African reality? Right? It is an African reality.
Correct.
About a decade ago, I interviewed Eric Gitari. Eric Gitari was the executive director of the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. And I asked him, as a gay man, and he's openly a gay man. He's now doing his PhD somewhere in the United States, and somebody I highly respect. And I said to him, listen, what was it like being, what was that moment like when you discovered your sexuality? And he told a story about how, and it's in my book, so, and this is not a shameless plug, but ladies and gentlemen, if you could go to Amazon and just pay for a copy of my book.
Mbona kukuja na kitabu
No, what's the title of the book?
Si angekuja na kitabu
No,
sorry.
Title of the book.
Okay, the title of the book is Dialogue and Dissent, A Country in Search of a Constitution.
Dialogue and Dissent, A Country in Search of a Constitution. And it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, but the good news, and this is why I probably will be invited back to the studio, I have also made it available free to download on my website, irunguhoughton.org.
Okay. So those are two plugs. Your invoice to Tatuma.
Yes. But you can also download, read it online.
Okay.
But in the book, there's a series of interviews. So I interview a lot of human rights defenders back in 2014. One of them is Eric Gitari.
Yeah.
So I asked Eric, like that moment when you discovered your sexuality and that you liked men, what was that like? And he said one of the most difficult things was coming out to his family, to have this conversation. So he went to talk to his father. His father at the time did not accept it. He just got up and walked out the room, just couldn't handle it. The person that he was most worried about was his grandmother, because he had been brought up by his grandmother. And she, again, 2 generations above him. And he started blubbering, he said, in Kimeru. He tells the story very funnily. He started blubbering in Kimeru, and he couldn't figure out what was the Kimeru term for this, right? This person that he was, right? And she interrupted him and said, but, stop being foolish. In the Meru culture, we have always had homosexuals. So he said, what do you mean? He says, when I was a child, the grandmother said, when I was a child, there were 2 men that lived together. They were, I guess now some people would call them witch doctors, but they were healers. They were people who worked with traditional medicine. They lived together. The whole community knew those people have a special relationship, but they never interfered with them. They were respected because of the role that they played in the society. And therefore, it is not new to me as a Mumeru that I have a grandson who is gay. Now, I tell this story because, it is probably a Western invention that you have to fly to Europe and America to become gay. There are gay people in Kenya, and they have always been there.
Okay, Irungu, and not to cut you.
I was taking off. That was just the first story.
That's just the first story.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you want to guide it more.
No. So okay. Then let me let you finish the story. So
you want to land?
Because I want to challenge certain things.
Sure.
On that story.
You want to challenge Eric's story?
I'm not challenging Eric's story.
I would have to invite him here.
I'm not challenging Eric's story.
Okay.
I'm challenging the idea about this being an invention of the West.
Right.
I don't think there's any normal person who will say that homosexuality was non-existent in Africa.
So we get that base.
So we're in agreement with that. But then there's this, and of course there are some people, just the same way there are people who spread false information. But I think there's no one, even in the different generations, if we talk to your grandparents, there's no one who will say that this is a brand new thing that we've never seen. But then I think that's something that's sometimes thrown at the people who, for one reason or another, do not agree with that lifestyle, and it's thrown at them as they're saying that this thing has never existed. Now, I'll tell you what's different in the West and in African societies, or in Kenya specifically. In the West, they consume this different, and in the West, they have switched over time, on this issue. There's something especially in the West, called pageantry, whereby they walk on parades and everything.
The Pride Day in June.
Yes. So, and that happens a lot. The drag, the pageantry. So that wasn't something that, at least that I saw in Africa. And those are some of the things that are trying to being introduced. So it was there. The people were not, I'm not going to say there was no persecution, but then Western societies are the ones that had the worst kinds of persecution of people who are of same sex. So I think we need to be clear on the fact that I don't think there's anyone with a clear mind who will say this thing never existed. But I think how it is perceived and consumed in the West, which has changed, and they've changed how they talk about other people based on the way they've changed, is what is different, and different communities had different ways in the way they were dealing with them. And I think part of the problem is introducing that Western way of consumption within an African context. So I just wanted to make that clear for contextual purposes. But of course, I can't challenge a story that's not mine.
No, for sure.
Yes.
So Kikuyus, Kalenjins, most communities wore shukas. Men, let me put it this way. Men wore shukas.
Yeah.
They wore wraps.
Yeah.
They didn't wear trousers.
Yeah.
They didn't have underpants.
Mm-hmm.
Would you call that a drag show?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the feature is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
They are, male characters who identify as female personalities are putting on what would be considered by, I guess, mainstream heterosexual society as cross-dressing. Right? That's a drag show. I mean, a drag show is just cross-dressing.
No.
Okay.
But
let me
and I think that's the part. So those are the parts where we're going to agree to disagree, and this is going to be very long.
Can I move us to another point?
Yes, move us.
So, as Amnesty International,
yes,
we recognize a number of things. One is that the Constitution essentially has two major clauses in it. The first one is Article 27, which is the right to be equal and to be treated equally without being discriminated. The second one that is in the Constitution that is the idea that Article 45 is that the family marital unit is made up of persons of both sexes.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't say which sexes. So it doesn't say male and female, but it could be a male person, an intersex person, or a male person, right? Now, these are constitutional guidelines, guardrails for the society, right? So as Amnesty International, our position has always been that to persecute somebody for loving somebody of the same sex is actually, it's a human rights violation.
Okay.
Right? To essentially have them lose their job, to be evicted from their homes, to be murdered, like Sheila Lumumba, simply because she was a lesbian, or I'll come back. There are other cases that we've had.
Agreed.
Okay, so if we can agree that being gay or being in a same-sex relationship does not give license to people to harm you,
of course,
or to deny, then we're on the same page.
Yes, and I think there's...
Let me just come to one last one.
Okay.
I think most Kenyans, I mean, there are some people who, and let's be clear, some people would say it's an abomination, right?
Of course.
It's anti-Christian, it's anti-Muslim, it is there's all that anti.
Yeah.
But I think most Kenyans are at a place where they would say, a bit like the "don't ask, don't tell" policy in America, right? Or they
used to be in the military.
The comment of President Uhuru way back when, where he says, "This is
a non-issue."
It's not that he's saying it's not important. What he's saying is that there are bigger issues that are there, and that somebody who identifies as an LGBTIQ person, that person should not be deprived of all the other rights, right? So on that one, we're together, right? My position, a very simple one, and I keep saying to this.
So I think,
let me just finish on the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll stop then.
Yeah.
The day that the government comes into my bedroom to start analyzing who I'm sleeping with, is the day that I would declare that my bedroom is too small for that. And I've told my wife that the day that we must fight the government is the day that they come into our bedroom.
Yeah.
As long as nobody's getting hurt.
Yes.
Right. So there's some consensual stuff happening there. I'm paraphrasing because of the children who may be listening. The fact is, our bedrooms are not places for states to intervene.
I agree with you.
That's all.
When it comes to like the other rights part, I think that's where there needs to be clarity.
Yeah.
What rights are we talking about? Because like what you've talked about, harming them, evicting them,
firing them. And there are kids that have not been able to finish their education because there were allegations that they were sleeping together in single-sex schools.
So we're in total agreement.
Okay. There.
So I think the problem is when we start crossing the line and go into issues of now. For example, like within the Western world, they've crossed the line and they're like, we should now give them the rights to get married. Like in the US now, like it is legal for gay people to get married.
So as two Kenyan men,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming we're both heterosexual men. Let me make that assumption.
Good assumption.
Okay.
Very good assumption.
As two heterosexual men, I don't think we have the right to essentially establish or to pronounce how Western society should decide to organize itself.
We don't.
Right?
Yeah.
So to be honest, I sympathize with you if it's uncomfortable that you're in Maryland, but my sense is...
I think the juxtapose I'm trying to bring is, for example, this idea of live and let live. And I'm in agreement with you. Like what people do in their bedroom, there's worse things people are doing.
Yeah.
But within this Western context that we are living in, which is very different, would you be mad, like at a person if we came and said, because of like something that a minority wants to introduce here, for example, a good example is polygamy.
Right.
Polygamy is viewed in a very different way in Western societies. So if we came as maybe a group of people who wanted to be polygamous and started demanding our rights, would you be, would it be okay?
Let me go a bit further. I would personally support you.
Okay, but would you be angry at an American who's only known marriages between one man and one woman to this person who's now coming and saying we now need marriage for one man and 2 or 3 women?
To be honest, if it was consensual, they're adults, nobody's getting hurt in the process, it's not my business. Like,
it's not your business.
My life will not stop, in terms of what my neighbors are doing.
But you see where the juxtapose is.
As long as there's no violence.
As long as there's no, but you see where the juxtapose is, where it is socially acceptable to be against the idea of polygamy in a Western society, but then it becomes you're labeled in certain ways. If you don't agree, you're not interfering with the way they're living. You're not for them being hii kitu ya wao kupigwa ama being evicted na nini, but you're just not, the idea is you're just not agreeing with this kind of lifestyle. And even as a parent, sometimes even here in the West, they're like, this is something that I want to opt out of my children being taught in school. So the juxtapose I'm talking about is these things that it's socially acceptable for a Westerner to say polygamy is bad. But then now when you come back in a different, you're from an African society and you're like, I don't agree with this lifestyle, you're some kind of backward person, you're some kind of person who, that's a juxtapose that I'm talking about, which I think needs to be challenged. And then sometimes people throw these things like, oh, you guys are saying this was never invented here or there, but let Mika speak because this is actually,
we should open it up a bit.
We should open it up a little bit. Mika, this is a question that Mika had brought up, so maybe Mika talk so that we can get a different perspective and on why you felt like this question was important.
Yeah, and then the comments are quite interesting.
Yes, then we're gonna come to the comments.
They're bubbling.
They're bubbling.
Yeah. See me and Timurima, but Murima imeguzwa hapa.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Unaogopa stories sana. No, but me, I agree with what Irungu is saying, because at the end of the day, being gay and you do realize that the aspect of gayism that is really shunned upon in Africa and most of the world is homosexuality more than anything else. And if we go back to, as we all agreed, and I don't want to take us back to history, this has been something that's been happening there back in time, even back to history when people had body slaves. That was the function of the body slaves. When you went to war, you're going with a body slave to manage my challenges for you. Kondo ukipigana unapigana na akili iko clear. But what we need to talk about is that also there's, as much as we're saying we've been raised in a way whereby we know that this is not something that's accepted in our culture. It's something foreign among us. But also this hate that we have is something that has been taught into us. Right? We have religion, which plays a big part in telling us that this is wrong. And then we have the Western culture that was trained to us, that came and told us that it is illegal to do this. Like these were laws that were put in by the British, and they were put in during colonial times. So it's something that, is it something that is just preached along? Like the way we were talking about rights for other people, the way we were talking about rights for women, they were talking about rights for children. And should we also have a right on allowing somebody to love who they want to love? We don't want it to be, yes, we're not saying that let's accept all what every other country is doing on how they want to write their laws, but let's just have the decency of not killing people because they're gay. Let's have the decency of not disinheriting people because they're gay. Because I always ask people this simple question. If your child told you, you've loved your child the whole of your life, amefika miaka 25, akuja kwambie, Dad, Mom, I'm gay. Will you stop loving them because they're gay? Or will you continue loving them because they're your child and you've loved them all your life?
Yeah. Now, Irungu, before you answer Mika's question, because that question also comes up. Forget about being gay. If my son one day comes and tells me I'm a killer, I have murdered 1,500 people, will I stop loving my son? Absolutely no. But I'm bringing that up because this is also brought up, like to emotionally charge. So yes. So most people who are against that, and I know people are afraid of speaking because they fear being labeled, because that happens very fast. I can already see it in the comments happening. So people fear speaking about this. But yes, if, for example, one day my son comes and tells me, Dad, this is the lifestyle that I'm living. It doesn't matter what it is. So I think it's important to have clarity on that. And I'm saying this because I know there's a lot of people out there who want to say something, but because of the environment that has been created, it's like you're either for this or you're hateful. And what I like about how Mika brings it out is that Mika also acknowledges, in as much as, we may see this in divergent views, Mika also acknowledges the problem that's there with the people who are now in this class, whereby they quickly try to throw people under the bus as being hateful, as being this or that, whatever they're accusing those people of, they're doing it in a worse way.
Before let me add on to that. I think there's also, and it's a conversation and discussion outside of the show, amongst peers and some, boys, just having discussions. And sometimes it's like the conversation or the view is so one-sided. In that it behooves the persons being told to accept what is going on. However, in as much as you want me to accept your situation, how about you accept that my situation where, hypothetically speaking, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
I'm not for any hate. I'm not for you to be fired from your job. I'm not for you to. But I just don't agree.
It's just like, listen, if you're lactose intolerant, and if you are and I am not, I cannot bring milk and say, boss, kunywa maziwa. Where would you?
Jikaze tu.
Boss, jikaze kunywa. But yet you're lactose intolerant.
So
I mean, and I think it's a cheap way to describe it. But however, it is a practical way, because respect the fact or respect my stance where on my stance on this particular issue. I'm not saying, like you said, I'm not going to say you're never welcome to my house or whatever. No. But I understand you do your thing. But respect, you want me to respect, I will respect your position. Respect my position of not wanting to being uncomfortable, or in the situation that I've been brought up for the last 30 years or 40 years, this is what I've been taught.
Yeah.
There's also that, because and by the way, just to let you know, we have tried, if we can get the gentleman who's doing the PhD, because we have really, I think you guys can agree with me, we've tried to get somebody to talk matters LGBTQ.
That will be, and before Irungu comes in, I think part of the problem with this, and I like this conversation we're having, but part of the
Omosh has been too quiet for my liking.
I know Omosh escapes.
Apana.
No, he escapes.
Said Saya.
Yeah. No, I know, but
injury time.
But I think where
he knows what time
penalties.
But I think where I think sometimes both sides do not get value in such conversations is that there's a belief. There's sometimes one side or the other, sometimes both. There's a belief that you can change the view of the other side.
That's very true. The thing is, when people have that conversation, they have that conversation with the intention of converting the other, and it's not supposed to be like that. And I think there's a time we were talking, and we were talking about how we have improved communicating with people around, and I think we both mentioned that these days we don't have conversations to argue. We have conversations to understand.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I won't try to convince you. I won't try to argue with you, but I would want to understand where you're coming from. And I will try to make you understand where I'm coming from so that we can have a more meaningful conversation. It's better than trying to argue, because if there's one thing that is very hard to change in this world is mindset, because mindset is something that is ingrown, it's built, it's taken time. You'll never change somebody's mindset by having an argument with a 10-minute argument with them.
Maybe just a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think the search for common ground on this issue, like all the controversial issues over the history of time, at one point it was controversial that women should work, that women who worked for government should have a pension, because the understanding was that the husband would take care of at some point, So there are periods in which issues become controversial, and the search for common ground is really important. It is critical that we don't label each other, right? And actually resist the temptation to start creating, I guess, groupthink and others, right? Because ultimately what we're discussing is the freedom of choice, right? So how can we have a conversation about people's freedom of choice to choose their sexual partners or their, intimate partners, and we don't give the freedom to ourselves to be able to have this discussion, right? So I think these are 2 points. Binyavanga, one of our, one of our most famous Kenyan writers, was a gay man. And I listened to John Githongo, the anti-corruption whistleblower, on, I think it was Spice FM even, in one of the mornings.
Yeah.
And John said, we didn't think very much about gay people, but we knew it was something that was not African. And then we discovered that one of our school friends, Binyavanga, who we all loved platonically, was a gay man. And then we had to confront the fact that actually we had a friend who was gay. And that side of his life we didn't understand until much later, until he came out. So I think the other thing to recognize is that, we sometimes label people in letters. And just because it's getting late, maybe just tell a little joke. I was at comedy hour. By the way, comedy hours are fire in Nairobi at the moment, right? They're really, really great. Mm-hmm. Let me just do a shout out for those people at the Laughter Bar on Kingara Road. If you were feeling low, if you're feeling you need to be uplifted, it's a great place to be. One person stood on the stage and said, actually, Kenyans, we're becoming liberal one letter at a time. LGBTQ we're kind of struggling with some of the letters, but on intersex persons, it's well known now that actually formally the state recognizes intersex persons. These are people who are born with both male and female organs.
Yeah, so not by choice, because remember nowadays there are people who are trans through processes, and that's a different angle altogether. Yeah.
So the joke was, Kenyans are becoming liberal every day. We are now accepting LGBTQ plus people one letter at a time.
Yeah.
Anyway, leave it there. But let me. It might land with you later. Ali. Keep an open mind. Open mind. Let me come to the last couple of things. So let's not label each other. Let's not create the space for hatred against any community. Those that are against, those are for, those that are, those that aren't. It's really important that we do that. And then just lastly, I think the critical thing for me that I made a note here is it is just so important that we don't allow communities to become ostracized and profiled. I often say, if you don't like gay people, don't marry them. Right? It's just as simple as that. Right? Choose the people that you do have a connection with, like an emotional connection. But don't stop other people who love people of the same sex from loving them. Right? That's my view. And as I say, it's just a view. You have a view. The search for common ground continues. But the one thing I hope that we've agreed is that nobody should be persecuted for their choices.
Yeah. One last thing before we come to a close, because we're going to come to a happy close, been very hot discussion, is the other thing that I also like bringing up is sometimes there's this talk in normal conversations where people they begin with disclaimers. Let's take away culture and religion from this conversation. I think that's also problematic because there are people, we are mixed people. There are people who culture and religion doesn't play a significant part in their life. And then there are people who culture and religion are still very, very important in their lives. And I'm going to talk about, the community I come from. I always represent. I always say the things that many people from my community will not come out and say in public. These things are very important to us. We are one of those Muslims, that is. We are one of those unique faiths.
Could be a Buddhist.
Yeah, we are one of those unique faiths.
Not there's any problem
in the world. Actually, there's over 6,000 religions in the world, but we are one of those very unique faiths in the world where if you're an ascriber, you're supposed to accept everything. You can't pick and choose what you like and discard what you don't like. Yeah, which some people may find very unusual, very weird, but that's one very unique feature of Islam. This is a unique overall of Islam, and that's where there's certain things that some people may be uncomfortable with. Why is a man getting twice the inheritance of a woman? So that's something that you may be uncomfortable, but if you ascribe to this, you have to accept it. And there's some wisdoms that come behind it. So whenever people say, let's take religion out of this conversation, that's, you're basically saying that I am not acknowledging the feelings of, let's call it 50% of humanity, but I want us to discuss this from our own prism that we like, from where we are, where we can pick and choose what we like and what we don't like, and that's where it is. And another thing I want to tell, I want to remind my Muslim brothers and sisters, if there's any who are tuned in, within the Islamic faith, there is certain sins, sometimes we make jokes here about haram and halal, and you see sometimes they get me. We are not perfect, and we are also human beings, and we slip up.
You see, you wanted that brown envelope.
Yeah, I know we slip up sometimes. It was a slip up. But the good thing, let me tell you, we
get up quickly and we keep moving.
But the good thing is that, Sisi, we are judged on actions and not what you think or what you plan. It's what you actually do. Yeah. So if I was planning to get that brown envelope, but it didn't happen, So hapo I get away with
you've
it.
never received a brown
Hapo I get away with it.
from all of us?
No,
story nyuma ya tent.
Sorry. But
Ali, let me just come back to you, because I think that's another area we would agree.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to have atheist conversations about sexuality. I think we can have religious conversations.
Yes. Yeah, because I think
because there's space. But let me just say that, so Valentine's Day. This is one for the ladies, particularly, and for the men.
The history is interesting.
History is interesting, right?
Yeah.
It comes from the idea that there was this young priest called Valentine who used to marry young men in the time of the Roman Empire secretly, because they were all being conscripted to go into, the the Roman Caesar's, infantry, and he married them in secret, and just about a week after Valentine's Day, a gay imam, actually he would say a queer imam, he was openly gay in Cape Town. His name was Mohsin Hendricks, was shot dead coming out of the mosque. And this is a place that he had essentially, he had run this mosque as a safe place for gay Muslims and also for straight Muslims as well. And in that moment I realized that actually the hatred that this issue generates can actually, flip back even on people of faith.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think this is something. I before we close, I know you're going to close this. I do want to say something about Feroz Novoroji, because I think for those of us in the DMV area,
we're going to come that to the end. We're going to come that to the end, because I don't want us to mix the very great story of Feroz with this light, these points of agreements that we're trying to come on together. But within that story of the gay imam in South Africa, the one thing I wish to remind Muslims sometimes is that you have no right, even if someone has openly said this is what I am, you have no right to take someone's life, because that is not in your position. That is not Islam. That is not in your position. So if there's a Muslim who did that, doesn't matter. He's wrong, because sometimes, unfortunately, when Muhammad does something, it's all Muslims. But when John does something, it's only John who did it. And it's just sometimes the way the way the world is. But what I was trying to also remind my Muslim brothers and sisters, because this becomes also a very emotive issue, is that the other unique thing about the Islamic faith compared to the Christian faith, where dhambi ni dhambi, doesn't matter whether you stole a cup or killed someone. In Islam, it's very different. There's grades of sins that you can do, and there are those grades that are called kaba'ir, which are like the top kaba'ir, which is the top 10 greatest sins. Among them is associating God's power with something else, murder. Those are top there. So on top there, I would not say top 10, but maybe around top 15. So this issue of LGBTQ is there. But the interesting thing, what's almost at the same level? Fornication.
Of any type?
Yes. And adultery. There's no fornication. So sex outside marriage, that's a red line. And you see, the thing is with Islamic doctrine, it's very open, and these are the disagreeable parts are usually very few, but this is one of those, even all whatever strands of scholars, they all agree. So fornication, they're almost at the same level as LGBTQ. A lot of Muslims don't know this. Fornication and adultery. So the thing is, when you're going inside a mosque, there's no one who checks at the door asking you, are you gay?
Checklist.
Are you adulterous? Are you a fornicator? There's no checklist. So because I think sometimes that narrative also gets pushed that that people who practice this type of behavior are not welcome in a masjid. Nobody cares. I went to a mosque in Gaithersburg today. There's no one at the door to ask you, is this who you are sleeping with? Because everybody, they're dealing with different kinds of things. But I think it's very important. When I discovered it myself, when I got more into the deeper study of the faith, and when I discovered that adultery and homosexuality, because you see, I think with different cultures, there's certain things that will emphasize about, for example, like issues like alcohol. If you come from a culture where alcohol is not a common thing, it's going to be emphasized. But now this is a very interesting thing that I would like for my also Muslim brothers and sisters to know, as we are talking about this, let's also know that adultery and fornication in as far as the intensity
Ziko hapo.
and the gravity. They're all. I'll tell you, I was very shocked when I personally discovered that. And the one thing that I've personally come towards over time, because I think also my friends that we've known each other for so many years have seen this transition in me, is that there are certain things that I was also very uncomfortable with within my faith, but as I took time to study them, I understand the wisdom behind it. And that's the reason why I always tell people, if you meet people of faith who are against something or for something, just respect their position the same way you want your position respected. No one has the right to take anyone else's life. True. No one has the right to deny someone a source of income or anything of that sort. But I think, because the religious people are the ones who've been accused, and in some cases justifiably so, of perpetrating this kind of hate. But I think what has happened also on the other side is getting to the levels, or even worse, of what they're accusing people in this other side of doing. And now